Hello, everyone, and for everyone who's been here since the beginning, from track one, it's been a long while. It's been a while. We apologize if some things came up and it took a while to set things up properly. And for the people who are joining us newly, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for showing interest in this session. I can guarantee you learn a lot and it will be an interesting experience. So let's get started. Uh, First, before we get into it, just a small introduction for those who are new. Uh, Android Study Jams is a program started by the Google developers to help people get introduced to Kotlin and Android Studio and develop Android applications using Kotlin, which Google has declared the better language or official language of Android applications as opposed to Java. And there's good reason for that. Kotlin has certain advantages over Java that makes it a more desirable language, especially for developing large-scale applications, such as Android applications, the ones that you use every day and see every day being used very commonly. So the prerequisites are as listed below: the basic computer literacy, computer and headphones, math skills, good internet connection, and obviously track one would be the prerequisite. In case you haven't had the time to go over track on a complete track one yet, it's fine. I'll be quickly going over through what was covered in track one, so you can uh, you'll be able to understand what will be taught in this session also. And another point is this today's session won't be going too much into new things, so you can still catch up track one and today's session by the time the next session starts. So this is today's schedule. It's around 2.5 hours. Uh, in the first half an hour or so, we'll be covering the first three parts, which again serve as a revision for the first track. So, and then after that, we'll get into the new stuff in the later half of the session. And again, just to reiterate for the people who've been with us since it's been a while, and for even the new people here, the Android Study Jams is basically followed along with the course, and the course is split into two tracks, track one and track two. Track one is for people who are completely new to programming, and it looked at the basics of Kotlin and the basics of a couple of basic concepts in Android programming as well. It's split into two units, and each unit has what are known as pathways, which I'll explain in the upcoming slides. So track one had 6 pathways, 4 pathways for unit 1 and 2 pathways for unit 2. And track 2 is a bit longer at 10 pathways, 5 in each. So this is the course website, and this is the track 2 that we'll be focusing on for over the next couple of weeks. And this is the first unit, which will be starting today. And like I mentioned before, a pathway is basically just a series of activities to get you familiar with a certain concept or a couple of concepts by having you do something that are known as code labs. People who've participated in 30 days of Google Cloud, you'll be familiar with code labs. They're just lab exercises with a certain goal in mind, and you have to follow along the steps, read what's given, understand the core and the concept surrounding the code, and practice yourself. And at the end of each pathway, you'll take a quiz, after which you'll earn a badge, you can see in your developer profile. And if you collected all the badges for all the tracks, both tracks by the end of the DSA AACB session, track 2 sessions, you'll get something special. You get a certificate from signed by me, the facilitator. This is the developer profile where you can see all your badges being added. And again, I mentioned this again, but for the newcomers, this is a very practical course. It's meant to be so because you can't learn how to build apps just by listening to people or reading documentations or links. So I highly recommend that everyone here, start building their own app. There's no limitation as to the creative thinking behind it or the idea behind it. You can go wild, let loose, think of something, anything that makes sense to you or you'd feel useful, that you would many a times we would think, oh, it'd be great if I had an app for this, or why didn't they make an app for this? Instead of bickering now, we can start building our own apps. So whatever you wish you had as an app, you can try to build that. And if you need any help, you can of course come to us in the group. We'll get back to you as soon as possible. I'll be sharing a couple of links that I've shared in the past that people who've been there since the beginning, so the newcomers can get started as well. 1 second, I'll quickly go to the course website and show you the course and how it is. So this is the course website. For these sessions, I'll be the one doing the code walkthrough for the code labs as well. So you don't have to actually do it yourself. So all the links regarding the courses and the code labs and stuff I'll be giving later on in the group. But for now, this is just to get you acquainted. So you have 2 tracks here. The new to programming track was covered in December, and we'll be starting the prior programming experience track. So if you hit start course, you can see 2 events, 2 units, my bad. And yeah, you can see all the badges. And as you see, I've completed all 10 badges, so they're highlighted. And the developer profile can be accessed like this. You'll have to sign in again. Yeah, so as you can see, this is how your badges will be displayed here. You'll see your badges like this, and you can confirm that you completed a pathway once you come back to the developer profile and check that if you've got the corresponding badge for the pathway. So let's get started. This is a recap of track 1. I'll quickly go through it. In the first session, we looked at some basic programming concepts such as variables, loops, what is a program, why we need programs, what's a programming language, and how it relates to a program, and even IDEs, which are short for integrated development environments. And to give you the tip of the iceberg, they basically let you talk to computers and write set of instructions that you can execute with a certain goal in mind. And that's how we talk to the computer via Android Studio, which is an IDE itself for developing Android apps. And that with this tool, we can develop our own applications. And we set up Android Studio as well. We installed it. And in the second session, we looked at randomness in programming, how you can generate random numbers or random values, which might be very useful in certain cases. We took a look at one of the most fundamental and important concepts in programming, classes and objects, which help you incorporate real-world entities into your programs. And we saw how that was useful with respect to Android apps and programming in general. Then we took to Android Studio and designed and displayed a few screens. And again, we went back to Kotlin and learned how we can help our program make decisions with the help of conditionals. In the third session, we looked at heredity, which further extends the concept of objects and classes and resembles real-world entities further by adding an extra layer of complexity. And on the Android side, we created styles and themes for our apps to make it look more aesthetically pleasing and make it uniform all over the place instead of using different colors for different screens. Lastly, in the latest session, which is the fourth session and the last session for track 1, we saw how we could store multiple items in a variable by way of lists. And we were able to display a collection of items on the screen. Basically, we looked at the parallel concept of lists in Android, which are called recycler views. And we saw how we can bring that to life in an app. And we even looked at loops, which basically repeat a certain action again and again until required or until stopped. So this represents the recycler view. This is one of the apps we built, and in each of the sessions we build an app. Similarly, we'll build either at least one app in the upcoming sessions and maybe 2 sometimes. And this represents each one of these pictures was taken from each of the slides in the previous sessions. So this is just to give an overall view. Today's goal will be completing the first 4 pathways of track 2, and we'll be taking a look at mainly the trivia app, the About Me app. You can go through yourself. It comes under the recap of track 1. So yeah, this is the About Me app and this is the trivia app. After today, you'll be able to run your Android apps on an emulator or device, add UI components to your app, and give components in your app more structure. So the first 3 points again were covered in track 1 in more detail. I'll be skimming through each of them because it might be a repeat for people who are new. But I'll talk about them enough so that the new people can get accustomed to the flow of the session and the concepts. Finally, the last point, which is what we'll spend a bit more time on, is something that's new for everyone, which is basically including multiple screens in your app and setting directions for each screen. So if I wanted to go from screen A to screen B and screen B back to screen A, or even from screen B to screen C, how Android Studio would help us integrate that easily. And this is done through something known as navigation, which we'll take a look at later on. So this is for pathway 1. Like I mentioned, Android Studio is the official tool to build Android apps. It's an IDE. It's a very useful and very intuitive software that has a lot of things in it that make it easier for you to develop or debug and test your apps. It's a very powerful tool. I recommend messing around it a bit before starting the actual pathways. Even if you're doing track 1, I'd recommend one of the first things in track 1 as well is installing Android Studio. So once you do that, I think it'd be best to mess around with it a bit, look at all the options you can find, and then start the pathway. Anyway, these pathways introduce new aspects of the tool whenever required, but I think it's best to try and explore yourself before being told what is there in the tool. And an emulator is basically it's a device that lets you simulate your app as if it was run on an actual device. You can think of it like a virtual machine where you can run another OS on your computer without actually bifurcating it. But yeah, with respect to Android apps or Android Studio, it's just like a phone on your device. It's like a virtual phone that you can run multiple apps on, and it functions like an actual phone. So for any project, you will get the starter code provided to you by Android Studio has a very detailed file structure, and we'll be exploring more of the file structure this time as compared to track 1. So again, there's nothing too much to know about it before going to track 2. Yeah, so we can look at the code labs for pathway 1. So this is what pathway means. You'll have a bunch of activities. It's usually either a video, a code labs, or quiz. Each pathway only has one quiz, and you have unlimited tries, so don't worry. But obviously, be sure to if you get stuck on a particular question again and again, make sure that you go back to the pathway and relearn the concepts. One more thing, this site is a bit buggy, so don't think that if you sign in once, you'll be signed in throughout. As you can see here, until a few seconds ago, I was signed in, but now upon clicking the pathway, I've been signed out. So at each and every turn, when you open the website, when you start a pathway, when you start a code lab, all 3 times make sure you're signed in. Otherwise, your progress won't get counted. So that's a thing to look out for. So this pathway is really small, and this is what the code labs look like. You'll have a bunch of tasks here or stages for the code lab. And each stage comes with a fair share of reading that details about the particular stage. So here this is just a welcome and an overview of the code lab ahead. And if you go to the next stage, which you can click by going next, you'll see that here you've been given a task, which is installing Android Studio. And this code lab has a bunch of reading that you can do related to the task. So this will take about 50 to 70 minutes depending upon your internet connection. You can go to the official Android Studio page, or you can even follow through with the documentation, all of which I'll provide links for once the session is over. So that's an overview of the first code lab. The second code lab, and as you see, completing just first code lab gets you a badge. So again, you'll have to make sure that you're signed in so that you can claim your badge right away. Yeah, so you can see this code lab has many more tasks as compared to the first one. So the starter code always gives you a page like this with the words hello world printed onto the screen. And this has quite many tasks: how to create the first project, exploring Android Studio, exploring other things in the startup project. Basically, I'll go through it very quickly now in the interest of time. Gradle is a build tool, which basically means it helps you build your project or compile all the resources and all the code in your project to run your app successfully. There's another popular build tool called Maven. Another one is Ant. So all these three basically help you uh, build the application, which again basically means that it's converted and compiled into compact code that can run on your studio, which is understood by your computer. So like I mentioned before, there are certain steps to setting up a virtual device. Alternatively, you can run your app on a physical device. You'll need to do a few more things with respect to this. Again, all of this has been covered in more detail in the Track 1 Code Lab, or even the sessions that I conducted for the same. And all those can be found in the Google Doc that I've given in the group. So yeah, that's it for the first pathway. And here you can even take the quiz. It has, if you go through the pathway properly, these questions aren't too hard. So again, like I said, if there are unlimited tries, and if you get stuck again and again on a particular question, be sure to go and relearn that particular concept in the pathway. So now we'll head back to the slides and look at what's required for the next code lab or next pathway. So this next part talks about user interface, which is basically everything that you see on your screen. All the text, all the images, buttons, menu, back button, share buttons, hamburger menus, and drop-down menus, spinners. All these things come under what's known as UI, which stands for user interface. And this can break or make your app, as this is the first thing that the user sees when they open the app. And it helps them decide if they want to continue interacting with your app or they want to leave it. So this is just as important as functionality, in my opinion. And luckily, I think people who are familiar, or at least a little familiar with web development, will agree that sometimes working with UI through HTML and CSS can be a pain. Luckily, Android Studio makes it very easy for us with a drag and drop tool known as the layout editor, which helps you design screens for your apps in a very easy manner. I really like it. And that's another advantage of Android Studio, that it provides us this really helpful tool. So the next concept we're going to be looking at is views, and views are building blocks of UI components. Like you can see here, text view basically represents the UI component of strings or text. So as you can see here, hello is just a piece of text, so it comes under a text view. Image view represents a picture or a GIF or a video or anything like that. Basically media, it's usually, there are certain other views for streaming and live streaming and stuff, but for images or icons and things like that, you can use image view. And for buttons, you have the button view. It's not called the button view, but it is a view. And a view group is a collection of views. So when you bundle together a bunch of views, because on any screen, you're most likely you'll have more than one view. So you'll probably have text and a button, or images and text, or images, text, and buttons. So every screen has a view group, and they can be arranged relative to each other so that they don't jump around with respect to the positions and make the screen cluttered or unpredictable. And this is, we'll look at it later on in the next pathway 3, which talks about layouts, which helps us achieve this. So like I talked about, text view helps you display text, and image view helps you display images. This is a bigger picture, you can say. So here again, this is highlighting on the different views on different devices. They're all the same principle for across any device. It's just the UI components that any user interacts with. So this is the code labs for pathway 2. Again, there are a couple of stages here, and there are certain tasks. So like I said before, I'll be skipping over most of this one because it's already been covered in track 1 in more detail. I've covered it as well. But just know that basically this all talks about how to add different buttons to your screens, and different settings you can fiddle with to make your experience easier while designing screens. And when we go to the fourth pathway, which is the navigation pathway, where I'll be actually coding and going along with the code lab, I quickly show you the basics as well that have been discussed here. So don't worry, I'm not completely skipping over it, because this is just a lot of unnecessary text, at least in this context with respect to track 2. So I'll be looking at these basic things when we actually move over to Android Studio. So this particular code lab is interesting. I think this is one even the people who've been here since the beginning should go through. It gives you a lot of links that you can go through, and tells you even how you can find other links. So that will make your experience of building Android apps or learning how to build Android apps easier. Here you can see it talks about changing the icons, and here it gives you a link to the official documentation for Android, and even for designing, and the YouTube channels and Stack Overflow, obviously, to help you if you get stuck anywhere or need any help solving an error. Right, so this is the last bit of, you can say, revision or skimming over. This is the pathway 3, and it talks about layouts. After this, will be going to pathway 4, where I'll actually get into a bit more detail and the nitty-gritty of it, and I'll be coding along with the code labs so you can understand better. So this particular pathway looks at something called as layouts, which I just mentioned earlier. And layouts are basically, you can think of how a screen is designed. There are certain predefined templates in Android for layouts that design or determine how the screen will be and how you can place the views. So if you look at the different types of layouts, you can see I pasted 2 here. One is known as linear layout. So if within linear layout, there are 2 subgroups. One is horizontal, one is vertical. So what it basically means is, if you choose the horizontal layout, you can only place the views in this manner. And if you choose the vertical layout, you can place them like this. Similarly, if you choose the table layout, you can place views in the form of a table. So hopefully this picture gives you a bit more idea about what layouts are. Like I said, they're like the skeleton for your screen, and it determines where and where not your views can be placed. You can design screens again through 2 ways, either a drag and drop, which is what the layout editor tool in Android Studio helps with, or you can directly code in the form of an XML file. So like I mentioned, you can choose predefined layouts or view group styles and design and fix or constrain movements of your and placements of your views. And you can access these views programmatically in your code through something known as resource IDs. So each view would have a unique ID, and that is what will help you identify the particular component in your program. And like I talked about earlier, you can position views relative to each other, and this is where constraints come in. So I can attach the top part of this view to the bottom part of this view. So when this moves, this will move as well. So up till now, I've talked about, I just mentioned that you can programmatically access your views in the code by your resource IDs. That is one way of doing it, although it's not very efficient because of the amount of code it takes. There is another concept known as view binding, which lets you access these views efficiently. What happens basically is that you create one object that encapsulates all the views in your layout, and you can access the views through that object itself rather than calling a certain object every time. So normally you'd have to call something known as find view by ID, which as the name suggests, you find a particular view through an ID, and you'd have to call that method every time you want to access a particular view from a particular layout. But if you do certain amount of setup and initialize one particular variable that will encapsulate all the views in your layout, you can access them directly from that object. So as you can see here in this picture, this is what the standard way of doing it is by using the find view by ID method. Otherwise, you can directly use a binding object and you can access the item better. Again, don't worry if this seems too confusing. I will go over this quickly and when we move to the actual coding part. So this is the code labs for the third pathway. Yeah, so quickly, this talks about the linear layout, which I showed you before. You can either have horizontal linear layout or vertical linear layout. And based on what you choose, you can arrange your views in a certain way. And you can add user interactivity with buttons and input feeds, and you can code it such that when a button is clicked or a certain view is clicked or UI component is clicked, certain code is executed. And you can even use data binding or view binding to, like I mentioned, you can use that certain syntax to make it easier to access the components. So like I said, up till now, we've looked just at the revision or kind of recap of track 1. And now we'll be getting into the new stuff that takes a deeper look at all the concepts of Android and sees how you can take your apps to the next level. So the first concept that we'll be tackling in this new era of learning are fragments. And fragments basically, if you look at the literal meaning in English, it basically means parts of anything. It's usually, if you can think of shrapnel when something blows up, there are fragments of the remains of fragments of the house or whatever blew up, that structure all around. Similar sense, fragments with respect to Android basically means splitting a screen. So if you see here, you could divide this screen into 4 parts and say each part is a fragment, and you can code for the UI of each fragment separately and combine them into one activity or UI, kind of like a jigsaw or a puzzle piece. And you can, like I said, you can combine multiple fragments in one activity. And the other advantage of using fragments rather than using whole screens is that you can reuse one fragment in multiple screens. And by the way, a screen is called an activity. That's the official or commonly used terminology for a screen or a page in an app. It's referred to as an activity in Android Studio. So you can combine multiple fragments in one activity. You can reuse them in multiple activity. And it can be thought of as a portion of an activity or a sub-activity itself. So right now you might be thinking, okay, this looks like an activity. Why did you place it here? Well, actually, it's a fragment. I did say that you can combine multiple fragments in one activity, or fragment is a part of an activity, but I did never said that it can't be a full activity itself. So this is a fragment, and we'll be seeing later on how this ties into the concept of navigation, and you'll better understand then why it's advantageous to represent a whole screen as a fragment rather than just using one activity when they both look like they'll achieve the same thing on a surface level. So now we'll get into the actual code lab and we'll be doing proper coding. Again, if you have any doubt, feel free to stop by asking the comments. If I might not see it, you can unmute and ask. It's as well. That's not a problem. So for the next remainder of this session, we'll be completing code lab for pathway 4, and we'll be looking at the first code lab now. So what you learn in this code lab is how to add a fragment to your app, at least manually by going through a bunch of steps. So the main app focus, or the main app that this code lab will be focusing on, is the Trivia app. The thing is, the Trivia app has already been built for us, at least partially. We'll be using the existing code, and we'll be adding our own code and seeing how they kind of interact with each other to make the full app. And through this, we understand bigger concepts and how they all tie in together to make the app run. Like I said, they will be working off a starter code. This can be found in GitHub through this link. You can download either only this, or you can download the entire Kotlin fundamental starter apps. Basically, for the next all the pathways in the future, all the next 6 pathways, they'll be working off of starter apps, and each of the starter apps can be found in the GitHub repository that is linked under this particular hyperlink. Again, in this GitHub repo, there are different stages that the app is in. Like Android Tibia starter is the starting code, and there are different stages for the same app, Android Tibia master, and things like that. So as and when required, you can download them, or if you work along with the code labs, then you don't have to download specifically. You can continue with what you've started already. One second, I'll share my screen and we can. Yeah, so this is the Android Studio tool. I'll just quickly go through it a bit and look at the basic stuff so you can familiarize yourself with it as well. So this is the file structure that I talked about. You have two views or two ways of looking at it. One is the Android view, or one is the project view. The project view gives you a bigger look into it, or a deeper look into it. You can look at other folders here. You can see that with respect to as compared to the Android view, where there are only 2 folders. Here you can look at a lot of other things, and this kind of view we won't touch very often. In the first track, the only place we had to switch this view was to include the app icon or the app logo, like include our own custom logo, because the default logo that comes with the startup project is just the Android mascot, and you can change that. When I mean logo, I mean the app icon that you see when you're on the home page. So we'll be mostly working with this view. I'll go through it quickly. And as you can see here, this is what will be running. So when you run this app, this is all these files underneath all the folders underneath this master folder or the top folder get compiled and translated and then bundled up into one piece so they can be run successfully and smoothly. And like I mentioned, Gradle is a build tool, and there are two types of, you can see two build folders. One is for the overall project and one is for this particular app. So sometimes in projects you can include more than one app. So then you'll have Gradle files for each project. For the whole project, and you'll have Gradle files for each module or each project or app included in the project. So if I open up both of them, people who work with Java or Python or any other programming language, this is basically like including external libraries. For us, we have, if you use Python, if you use PyCharm or any other IDE like that, you can use the command pip install whatever library to include the library in your project. And for Java, you can do a similar thing. You can include that particular, you can install it through other methods. And similarly for Android, you can't, there's no pip install, there's nothing like that. So you have to include whatever third-party libraries you want in these two files. So the top level one, which is the project level Gradle build Gradle file, we won't touch mostly. It contains certain things that are come by default with the starter code, so you don't have to mess with it. This is where we'll be spending most of our time, if any at all. So here you can see the dependencies, which basically means third-party libraries. One of them is the material library, which basically takes care of all the design tools and provides you with the different design options to make your app look that much more better. And coming to the other folder, the app folder, this contains the actual code files that we'll be tinkering with or messing with, writing our code in. This structure is generated by default when you start an Android starter app, or it comes right out of the gate with an Android starter project. So under the Java file, you can see all the files you created. This, you can create more packages, more files, and so on. And this we'll be looking at later on. You can only see something known as navigation. We'll be touching upon this later on in the further sessions where we get more detail and where we get into more detail of how navigation works and things like that. This is another interesting file. This basically stands for resources. And there are different for packages here or folders here, as you can see. And this is what is known as the layout editor. Like I mentioned before, it's a drag and drop tool that helps you design your screens. And you can see here that the layout we're using here is called linear layout, and it's a vertical, which basically means all the apps will be placed, all the UI components, can be placed like this in rows. If it is horizontal, they'll be placed in columns. So yeah, you can store images here. So this is the one image, this is another image. This might seem a bit confusing now, but as you go on and start to program, especially if you come from the track one, you'll be very comfortable by the time you reach this point in the course. So don't worry if it doesn't make too much sense right now. After this session, you can go back and refer to these particular concepts from the beginning, and you'll have much more clarity by the time you come here. So these are all the common UI components. You can just drag them and drop them, and you can attach constraints, or you can position views with respect to another, change certain attributes like text size, text color, or button color, background button color, and things like that. And you can even search for certain UI components here. So that's a basic overview of the Android Studio tool. Now we'll actually get into what the code lab says and see what we can learn from it. So like I mentioned, fragment, it basically represents a portion or a part of the whole UI in an activity. And like I said, you can combine multiple, or you can even reuse certain fragments in other activities. So now we'll create a new fragment and we'll see what happens. And I'll copy if there's too much code to write, I'll copy and explain it after I'm done, or I'll write it down and then explain it as I go on, as I'm writing. So what I've done now is created a fragment class. These fragment classes differ from the actual activity classes. So as you can see, there's a bunch of code that's been generated already. Fortunately, we won't have to use this code ever. This is just standard code that's generated, and we can remove all of this, or at least most of it. So what I did here is I had mentioned something about binding and view binding and how it's easier to deal with respect to accessing UI components. So that's exactly what I've done here. You don't have to worry too much about this code. Basically, what I'm doing here is taking this fragment and inflating, or basically applying that fragment on this activity or on this fragment. This is the fragment's design, and applying that particular layout file or the design file onto this fragment. So when we load this fragment in our app, we'll see this screen exactly in this way. So what I've done here is basically this fragment, I've taken it, but like I said, fragments have to be, they're usually placed or used in activities. But up till now, before I copied this code, all we had is a fragment. We had to include it in some activity, right? And that's what I've done. And like I mentioned before, activities are just the different screens you see in your app. And the default activity that's generated when you create a starter Android project is called the main activity. So what I've done here is just included a fragment. This is how XML works. Basically, you have different tags, and it's pretty self-explanatory the syntax. So here I've added a linear layout component, and here I've added a fragment component. And the fragment component, I mentioned which fragment we're referring to and other properties. So if you see here, you can look at the code and the design, and you can see that the code corresponds to the design. But if you look here, you'll see that you can't see anything, and you see something, it just says fragment. So what that means is basically this activity right now doesn't have anything, meaning there's no particular design to it. But when we run the app, it will load this fragment onto the activity and show it to us. So let's run the app. And this is what the emulator looks like. It's just like an actual phone, like I previously mentioned. It has all the standard things you'd have the phone to expect. And any application you run here will be installed on this phone, and you can look at them at any time you want. Another thing, sometimes it might take a while to run the app, especially if it's your first time running, or if it's your first time running the emulator. So be patient. Yeah, so as you can see, whatever we've designed here has been run here. So just a recap of what happened till now. Like I said, this is a starter code, so this has already been designed for us. If we can look at this quickly. So here, like I said, you have this button here. You have the text for the button that says play. And all these are basically different attributes or properties for this particular UI component. Oh, 1 second. Okay. Yeah, so padding start basically means it maintains a distance of 16 dp. dp is a unit of measurement. It's like cm or millimeter, you can think of it like that. So 16 dp from the start, and padding end means there are certain values. Basically, how we have, as we have variables in programming, we can have variables in Android as well, but they're defined a bit differently. So if you go here, you will have something known as the dimensions.xml file, where you'll have different values only written here, so you can use them instead of hard coding them each time. So here you can see button padding basically means there'll be a 16, you can say kind of like a force field or a border around it, a border of size 16 from all directions for any button if you apply this attribute to it. And a vertical margin basically means a distance of 16 dp on the vertical side, and similarly horizontal side. So you can explore all the different other attributes here, and similarly for the image view. So that's basically how fragments work in a very simplistic view. You can read about it more in the documentation or go through the whole code lab again properly. So that is the first code lab. We'll look at the second one now. Right, so all throughout the first track, we've only built single screen apps. Basically, you open the app and that's the only screen there, or that's the only page. But if you look at most real world apps, we all know that's not the case. If you look at YouTube or Facebook or Play Store or any app, you'll have more than one screen. If you look at YouTube, you have one screen to show you your homepage, one to show you trending videos, one to show you subscriptions, and so on and so forth. If you look at the Teams app, you'll have one to show you your calendar, one to show you your chats, assignments, so on and so forth. How are they done? How is it possible to do this? Well, turns out Android provides us two ways to do it. One is via intents and one is via navigation. Now, we won't focus on intents much throughout this course. The reason for that I will show at the end of this session, but just know that navigation, doing it via navigation provides certain amount of advantages as opposed to doing it with intents. So navigation simply means moving through an app. You have one screen and you need that when you click on a certain app, you take it to this screen. When you click the back button, you take it to this screen, and so on and so forth. Like suppose if you're playing a quiz app, which is what the trivia app is, if you play through a bunch of questions and either you get the game over screen or the you win screen. And if you press the back button, you don't go to the last question. You go all the way back to the beginning. How is that done, and how is that achieved? How do you ensure that if you click the back button on this page, you go all the way back to the beginning, but if you click it on another page, you go to the previous page, the immediate previous page. All this is done through navigation. As you can see here, we've created kind of like a story or a directional map where each screen in this particular app has many connections to it, many directions. From this page, you can go to this one and you can go back. From here, you can go here. And from this one page, you can go to these many pages. So all this is done through what's known as navigation. Navigation isn't a concept, it's actually a library in Android Studio. It's a library full of tools that help us achieve all this in a very simple manner, and we'll see how that's done soon. So another thing that the navigation library helps us with is there are certain common navigation patterns, such as the bottom navigation drawer with the back button, home button, and the menu button, and even the hamburger menu or the three vertical dots menu where you can click and you can share, delete, or certain other actions you can keep. All this is very easy to the navigation library. If you didn't use the navigation library, implementing all this would be very difficult and would be a really big hassle. So to avoid all that and make it easier for us programmers, Android has come up with this really powerful library, and we'll see how we can use it. You can even include transition animations between screens, so it looks smoother and doesn't look sudden or abrupt. And there's this one last point here, which is it handles the backstack for your app. What's a backstack? Let's look at that as well. It's basically like an app's browser history or screen history. For those familiar with programming, it functions like a normal stack data structure. For those of you who aren't, stack is basically like if you place books on top of each other, that's a stack. You can only remove the one that you placed the last, and you can only add on to the top. You can't add from the bottom. So think of a backstack as a stack that takes care of the screens you visited, and the items that you push or remove from the stack are the screens. So if you open up the YouTube app, let's take the example of the YouTube app. The first screen that we pushed onto the app is the home page. And when you click to the subscriptions page, the icon at the bottom, that we pushed onto the stack as well. Now, when you click the back button and go to the home page, the thing on top, which is the subscriptions page, would be removed, and only the home page would be left in the stack. But like I mentioned before, navigation lets you set how many pages to pop. So going back to the quiz app example, if you reach the end of the quiz and you press back, you'll go to the main screen. So navigation lets you pop all the pages you visited in between to give you that look that you're starting over. So now we talked about navigation and what it is, and basically it lets you connect all the pages in your apps and see what app can be accessed from what page can be accessed from which page and how the directionality of the pages is. Nav graphs let you visualize this. It's another drag and drop software. As you can see on the site, it's a drag and drop tool, sorry. So here you can see that we've connected different fragments to each other, and we've limited the directions that dictate the flow of the app. So this is the nav graphs, and along with two other components help you make up the crux of navigation. So along with nav graphs, you have something called nav host fragment. So let's break that up. Nav host fragment. It's a container that hosts all the fragments involved in navigation. It's as simple as that. So the nav host fragment is for a nav graph, you'll have one nav host fragment. In that fragment, it's not a fragment. Although the name might sound a bit misleading, the fragment in the name actually refers to all the fragments involved in the navigation process. So it's just a random container. It's just like a place or like a board you can use to set up all the directions between different apps, different pages, and how the flow will occur. So you'll see this in more detail in the second code lab, which is defining these paths. So like I mentioned, the navigation component is a library, it's a third-party library, and it's not implicitly installed or included in your app when you use the starter code, so you have to include it yourself. And this is where the build Gradle files come in. So you'll see here that whenever the tool detects a change in any of the Gradle files, it'll ask you to sync now, which basically means you're saving the changes and letting Android Studio know that you've included one more dependency or one more variable or library. So I'll sync it when we've done making changes in both the apps. So all will be done at once. So what it's doing now is basically it's rebuilding the app, which means it will look at the Gradle files and see if there's any new things to include. And we've included 2 new libraries. So it's downloading all the resources required for those 2 to work, and it will give us the newly built project so we can use the navigation tools and the other things related in the library without any trouble. While this builds, any of you have any doubts so far? Yep, okay, it's been built successfully, so we can go ahead. So now I'll be using adding a navigation graph, which is, like I showed you to quickly remind you, is this. So we'll be adding that and we'll be seeing how we can connect directions from page to page and determine how we want the flow to happen. So you can see here, this is what the navigation graph file looks like. And you can see here it's saying that no nav host fragments found. So we'll fix that in the next code lab, the next stage, sorry. So what we've done here is basically we've made the main activity of our nav host fragment. So what happens is when we eventually include more than one fragments in this nav host fragments, whenever we click from one page to another page, our main activity will swap between its fragments. So suppose I want to go from the starting page to the next page, it will remove that fragment and add the new fragment. So that's what the nav host fragment does. I said it before, it's a container, and in this case our container happens to be an activity, the main activity. So it will act as the host fragment for this project, and it is in this host fragment that we'll add all the destinations or pages. Basically pages are destinations, and we can link the destinations from saying detailing which page should lead to which page and how things should go back and stuff. And based on the coding we do, or enabling these transitions based on certain events, like when you click a button or when you type certain text, all that this host fragment to take care of by swapping in the corresponding activities. As you can see here, we have a bunch of different fragments, like it's a startup project, so this has already been done for us. And we can add each of these, more than one, all or some of these fragments to this host nav graph and connect each of the fragments to show how the app will progress. I'll start with the title fragment because that's the first thing that the user sees when they load the app. Yep, so we have 2 fragments here, and we have these little circles at the end of each fragment, and this is what lets us connect. So when I drag it like that, you can see there's an arrow between both these fragments, and this means that we've connected these 2 fragments. So we can direct the user from this fragment to this fragment based on our choice, meaning whether we click a button or tap on the screen. And these arrows are what's known as frag actions. So you can see that this particular action has the name title fragment to game fragment. So that's how it's titled appropriately. I can even drag an arrow back to the title fragment, and it will have it like this, and it will say game fragment to title fragment. I'll delete this for now. So now that we've set this up, we have to enable this, meaning that we have to enable the transition from this fragment to this fragment. So let's do that now. This is where binding comes in use. So what have I done here? I'll quickly walk you through it. So this binding object, or this binding variable, you can see it has this fragment title, which is this file. So this is the home screen or the main screen or the first screen that the user sees when they open this app. So what we've done here is we've attached all the components here, all as in there's only two now, but if we had more, they'd be included as well. This image and this button under this object. So now I can access the play button. If you're wondering why it's called that, it's because the ID or the resource ID for this play button this button has been set to play button. So I can access it like that. And this is what is known as a listener or an event listener, which basically means it waits for something to happen to that particular component, and when it does, it activates the code inside it. You can think of it like calling a function, but we don't explicitly call it, it happens automatically. So in this case, we're saying that wait till the play button is clicked, and when it is clicked, execute this code. So that's what on click listener means here. On the click of the button, listen for the click of the button, and when that happens, execute this code. And what we're doing here is we're invoking the third component that I talked about, which is the nav controller. So I said that the navigation library mainly includes three components: the nav graph, the nav host fragment, and the nav controller. We've seen all two of them already in action, and this is the third one. This is basically what lets us navigate from one fragment to another. So I think the code is, it makes sense if you read it in a proper manner. So you're calling the nav controller and you're saying navigate with this action. So this action again corresponds to this arrow, which means which means it will take the user from title fragment to game fragment. And what does that mean in terms of Android doing its job? Basically means it will display first in the main activity this fragment, and when this button is clicked, it will swap out this fragment for this fragment, because that's what the action we've defined here does. So we'll run this app and see all this in action, and hopefully you'll get a better understanding of what's going on behind the scenes. Yeah, so as you can see here, when we click play, we're taken to the game fragment. So that's how click listeners and fragment actions work. This is actually the main activity. When we click play, this particular fragment is removed and this one is shown. So now we'll talk about conditional navigation. Basically, in quiz app, to take an example, you either have the congratulations message or a game over message if the person gets too many questions wrong for the second case, and if the person gets all of them right for the first case. So we'll see how that's possible as well. So the first thing we need to do is include both of them in our nav graph here. Yep, so now I've added both the game over and game one fragment here and attached both of them to the game fragment because it has two possible options. If from the game fragment, you can either go to the game over fragment or the game one fragment or the screen. The nav graph isn't actually what helps us conditionally decide which fragment to go to. That's what we'll be doing programmatically. The nav graph just, I guess you can say, it gives you the possible list of options that one screen can go to. So in this case, the game fragment can either go to the game over fragment or the game one fragment. So this just helps you list out all the possible options and not definite paths. So this is the game fragment class, and this is where we'll be adding the logic to either navigate to the game over fragment or the game one fragment. So here we can already see that they've given us comments. So here itself we can add the logic to navigate to the corresponding one. So can someone tell me what the name for this action would be? Just a quick question. You can type it in chat if you want. Can anyone type out the action name to take us from game fragment to the game one fragment? What's the missing code in that bracket? It's just like the previous code we had, but slight modification. Yeah, the destination is game one fragment, and the code or the action would be action game fragment to game one fragment. So this is, again, if we click here, you can see that this arrow is highlighted. So from this screen to this screen, which is what we want. Else, in the case that you hit even one wrong answer, you will be taken to the game over fragment, which corresponds to this action. So let's see how this works in the once we run it. So I hit one question wrong and take us to the try again page. Right now, this try again button doesn't do anything because we haven't set any code for it. And if you go back, you see that you go back to the question game, but ideally you should go back to the starting of the game, and we'll fix this in the next next code lab. Just trying to get yeah, so let's move on to the next code lab and see how we can control the back stacks. This is when we click the back button, it pops all the screens and takes you directly back to the home screen. So this all this reading, this text basically details the different options you can set to control the stack and its pop action. So if you do pop up to, basically you select one stack, so it pop all the items in the stack except that one. And if you do pop up to inclusive, it will include that stack as well, otherwise it will leave it. So here you can see we have an attribute here or a property talking about pop up to. So we set game fragment and we make it true because we want to pop the game fragment as well. So now we'll run and see if it works the way we intended to. So like we intended to, once you so now we have the game one fragment, and once you hit the back button, instead of taking you to the previous screen, which would be wrong, it takes you all the way back to the starting page. And so here, if like I mentioned before, this try again isn't working again, so we'll fix that now as well. We'll add code to include this. So first we have to set that this is a possible path for the app to take. Similarly, we'll add this here. And again, when we click try again, it has to pop all the screens in between. So last time here, the way we did it was pop up to game fragment and included the game fragment as well. Another way we can do it is pop up to the title fragment, but make this false. So it will stop before the title fragment and keep only the title fragment in the stack. They're both the same way of doing it, it's just that different attributes you have to set. Now, obviously, we'll have to include code for those two buttons. So we'll start with the game over fragment. And as you can see, we can see the try again button, and we'll set the on click listener like we did for last time. And we'll set to navigate to the back to the title fragment. So we search for game over fragment to title fragment. And similarly in the game one, we will set the next match button. Set the next match button to game one fragment to title fragment. So let's see if this works. We'll try to test both if I can get the answers correct. No? Okay, so if you hit try again, it takes you back. So let's see if I can get the game over, game one screen. Okay, so I got the game one screen. So the next match button should also take us back to the beginning, but it's not. Seems there's an error. Okay, let's take a look at the code and see what went wrong. You create the view, and then we're initializing the object, and then we're calling the navigate button. One second, I think I have a. That's correct, yeah. So you guys are listening, or few of you listening. That's correct. So I did this on purpose to see how many of you would catch it. Good. Thank you, Prakash. It's the correct answer. I placed it in an unreachable position, which basically means I placed it after the return statement. So for any of you familiar with programming, this would make sense in the case of Java or Python or any of these functional programming languages, where when you create a function and you have a return statement, once the function hits the return statement, it will exit. It wouldn't bother to see what's underneath the written statement. So it didn't bother to search for this, and as such, I wasn't able to activate this. And another mistake I made is that I didn't set it in the click listener. But even if I had done that properly, it still wouldn't have gone, because, like Prakash said, I put it in a unreachable position. Yep, that's correct. No action listener. So now it's fixed. It should work now. And for those who are new to programming or have no prior programming experience, what the mistake I made was, one, I didn't set it in a click listener or an action listener. So this particular code would never have any situation to get activated in. It will just lie there. Another thing is this return statement is basically this function is a procedure or a set of instructions that the app or program executes. And certain functions or certain piece of code can expect something in return. And this is what the return statement is. It gives back what we're expecting. And once it returns or gives back what the function is expecting, that's it for the function. It doesn't bother to look what's below. So when I placed this below this statement, it didn't bother to go and check and see if there's anything below to execute. I had actually, when I was doing this course myself, I had faced this problem and didn't realize the error for a long time, which is why I put it in here for you guys so you'd learn properly and have it stick in your brain. So if I can get this right, we'll quickly see that this works as well. Yep, so if I click next match, we're back to the starting page. This is one of the things you can do with navigation fragments. It's not really necessary, so I will skip it in the interest of time. It's just an extra thing you can do, and it's something that the navigation library offers as extra. You can add an up button, which this is this part, and you can go directly from there instead of relying on this. Similarly, you can add an options menu, which is this 3 vertical dots. And you can add the navigation drawer as well. The reason I'm skipping this is because in the hopes that you guys will do it yourself, go through the code lab properly, and hopefully you get stuck someplace and you can come to us, and that way I'll have assurance that you guys are doing the stuff yourself too. Right, so let's look at the last part of this app, of this pathway in this session. So earlier I mentioned that there are 2 ways to include multiple screens in your app, and we've looked at one, which is navigations for now, and the other one is known as intents. Intents are the old-fashioned way of having multiple screens in your page, in your app. This is what developers used to do before navigation component, the library came along. And basically, you can think of intents as a message that is used for communication within or between one Android app, the same one, or multiple Android apps, as we'll see soon. So basically, if suppose in the case of the Trivia app, once we hit the start match or play button, we use the nav controller to activate a certain action and take to the next fragment. Conversely, if you use intents, you'd use the intent syntax to build a message. You use the intent object to construct a certain message, and you would say start intent.start or start this intent. So when you click the button, this intent object will be built and it will be started, and that message will activate the transition to the next activity. And it's there are 2 types of intents: implicit intents or explicit intents. Basically, if you talk about implicit intents, you have one specific action in mind, but it could open any app. Suppose you want to view a photo, you could use the gallery app, the photo app, any photo editor app. That is up to the user. It's not our choice. It's not our headache. So it's left in the air. It's not set by the programmer. Similarly, if you want to have a share connection, you can share action. You can share through Gmail, Bluetooth, WhatsApp, or any other app. Again, that's implicit intent because we don't really care about what app it's done through. All we're worried about is the action. And here the action would be viewing a photo, opening a file, sharing something, so on and so forth. On the other hand, explicit intents, specific action and specific activity as well. So we're setting both. Suppose we want to move from one page to another page. That would be the action. And specific activity, that is the activity we want to move to. We can't leave that up in the air and on random chance. we have a certain screen we want to move to, and we set that as well. So now you will be wondering, why do we have two? What's the point of having two ways to move through apps? Why can't we stick with one? Hopefully this will give you some clarity on the difference between both. Intents on one hand are just a simple message, while navigation is a whole large library loaded with a bunch of tools. Intents, you have to use multiple activities. So intents open other activities with that message when that message gets activated. Whereas navigations, they just swap out the different fragments in one activity. So for intents, you have multiple screens and multiple activities. For navigation, you have multiple screens, all the one activity, and each screen is represented by a fragment. So when you're using intents, you're actually opening up other activities, but whereas you use navigations, this is the same activity, just replacing fragments based on what you or the user clicks. Sometimes, suppose if you open up WhatsApp and you want to edit your profile picture and you click that certain screen, you'll see that your information is carried over to that screen as well. So obviously you might need to pass certain data between pages. And intents, those are arguments or data is passed without compile time checking. That means suppose on one screen you say that I want to pass an int, and on the other screen you set the message to be received as a string. You won't get an error while writing the code, but when you try to pass it, your app will crash because screen A gave in an int and string B would ideally expect it int, but you set it to receive a string. So it will crash without because it doesn't know what to do. On the other hand, navigation has something called the SafeArgs plugin, which we'll look at next week, and it provides for compile time checking for passing arguments. And intents, there isn't any built-in support for common navigation patterns, which basically means, like we talked about the navigation drawer or those three dots, vertical dots, or the up arrow or the bottom navigation bar. All these things aren't inbuilt with intents. You have to code them yourself if you choose to use intents. But navigation, they're built in and you can use simple syntax to get them up and running quickly. One disadvantage of this is with navigations is that you cannot start external apps like when you click share the button, that menu of choosing which apps to choose from, or if you want to view a photo, that you can't do, that functionality you can achieve with navigations, and which is why we'll have to still rely on intents from time to time, but for the majority of the time we'll be using navigations. So that's the last code lab for this session. Yeah, so not next pathway, my next code lab. This is what the SafeArgs plugin is. You'll have to include certain class path dependencies, and you have to add an app direction class. This basically means for each and every fragment you'll have a certain class generated as part of the SafeArgs plugin, and this is what helps you set up the compile time checking safety you've been promised with this particular fragment. So you can add and pass. You can add the parameters for in the nav graph itself, and you can pass them from here to there. And in the end, so like I said, navigation doesn't allow for these type of implicit intents. What implicit intents can achieve, you can't do that navigation. So we will have to rely on implicit intents from time to time. And this is how you do it. So like I said, you first build the intent with an intent object, and then you can put in data and you can start it. So start activity with this particular intent. So the name itself, you can see it's start activity, which means it starts another activity as opposed to swapping in fragments. Again, this I won't do now because I want all of you to go through it and actually understand the code and touch upon it yourself. So that's it for this session. There's something else at the end, which I'll quickly go through. But before I do, any doubts? Right. Okay. So, guys, there's an interesting event coming up soon. It's called the DSC Solutions Challenge 2021, and it's a you can think of it as a not exactly. You can think of it as a Smart India Hackathon, which basically, if you don't know, it was a competition it's held every year all over India, and different colleges come to participate. They form teams and work on a solution. DSC Solution Challenge is somewhat similar to that, except it focuses on the 17 United Nations Sustainable Development Goals that we have, and you have to form a team of at least two, minimum four, and work on a solution for any of the goals. This is another reason to start building apps as the course goes on, so you can get experience and maybe even try to participate in this competition. It will be really a fun experience working with team, with your friends, and also a practical experience that you can see the hurdles involved in planning and building a product, and overall just testing your skills. Is a great platform to see how much you know and how much you still need to learn. And these are the solution challenge links that related to them. You can go through all of them, and later on I'll be giving the slides, so you don't have to worry about the links. That's just something else, that's an extra factor to motivate you to build apps on your own. So that's it for today. I think we finished a bit early. Again, you have a bunch of links here to help you further learning in Kotlin and Android as well. I'll be sharing the slides like I mentioned, and other links as well to help you further your learning. Thank you, and see you next week.